What's up, y'all? This is going to be the first iteration of our build series. What we're looking at here is getting that base frame together here. So, as you can see in the video, and thanks to the help of my amazing helpers here, my wife and my daughter, um, you can see us just getting this frame together. This was this was a piece of work. This thing was like I don't know. It's 8 feet by 6 feet tall, so it's definitely a challenge. I definitely advise that everyone get these corner clamps if you can. The corner clamps are going to be, like the number one thing I would say. It's definitely going to save the need for extra pair of hands. But as you can see here, in addition to kind of getting that screwed in, I started drilling those pre-holes. Those pre-holes are going to be beneficial to getting your build, and also so that you don't split or crack the wood when you're driving the screws in. I'm also I'm cutting up some of my 2x4s for the front fascia. But in the background, you can't see me. I'm actually painting and coating any wood that I wasn't able to paint and coat the day before I cut at my father-in-law. Excuse me. I don't have a table saw in order to cut this wood, so I started with um, was like 4 or 5 sheets of 15, 30 seconds thickness plywood, and that was the John. That definitely helped out tremendously. I would have gone half inch, but the half-inch sanded birch like plywood that I wanted to get wasn't available at Home Depot when I went. So I grabbed a couple of the 15, 30 seconds sanded birch, and then some of the just regular birch plywood, non-sanded. And boom, here we are. Don't beat me up, but you guys will see I'm kind of struggling with these back panels here. Um, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was because I didn't have the corner clamps, or if it was because I maybe just aligned the overall structure wrong. But when I was initially installing the back panels, they weren't all lining up properly. I was kind of off. It could have been because there was a bit of flex, so that could have just been my mistake. However, I ended up installing them on the inside of the enclosure essentially. So that led me to having about like I would say an inch or so sticking off. So I had to cut that, and I went ahead and I cut that the next day. But that did kind of mess me up a little bit, so that was annoying. But additionally, here I'm drilling all of the holes for the back vents, and that took a couple of minutes there. Then going ahead and seeing them vacuuming up and I'm cleaning up, and boom. So I got all the holes in there. We got the back panel. You'll see in that top right corner. See how it was off. That's because I ended up using the inside dimensions as opposed to the outside. It was kind of weird. Shout out Talking Serpents. I definitely used a good amount of just their build 101 to get there. At this point here now, everything's done. I've cut the back panel, sealed it all up, and now I've used DAP sealant to get into the cracks and crevices. So I used the DAP sealant for the cracks, and then I went back over it with paint, of course. DAP sealant is, if I'm not mistaken, it's polyacrylic. So this is going to be 100. It's going to be super safe for your reptiles. It dries super quickly. You can paint over it. It has all of the protections of your regular silicone or sealants. I wouldn't I wouldn't use the aquarium silicone one. I did get that for the bottom section, anywhere where that potentially may see a little bit more moisture. But again, this DAP is great. I feel as if it's more not it's a little less toxic, excuse me, than the aquarium silicone, excuse me. I actually use the GE silicone one, which apparently is safe for reptiles and animals, but don't quote me on that. I also here did a Dutch door, so I'm putting on the front fascia here and just making sure and just installing that Dutch door. I got the hinges on either side, lining it up. boom, the bottom one there, and now I'm drilling in. I forgot to mention too, so when you're repainting the sealants, the seals, you can also, that's also a great time to go in and do touch up for, any blemishes or anything where you may have messed up, any holes, any nicks that you may have done um, while you were putting it together. So boom, I used a 2x1 to hold that bottom door up to secure it in place while I drilled it in to the actual structure. I used heavy duty hinges from Home Depot, and both of those doors about 30 by 4 feet. And the plexiglass I just cut with my handsaw. I got plexiglass again from Home Depot, 36 by 4 feet. I could have done the 3 foot wide doors, but I think it would have been a little too large. I do like the 30 by 40 by 48-inch doors. Right here, I'm installing I'm installing the shelves. So the basking shelves are there, of course, for height to have some ability to be up off of the ground, basking away from, of course, the floor of the shelf. It's a 6 foot tall enclosure. It's going to be needed. And you can't really see the hinges there because I did paint those black. Right here, I'm actually sanding the back ventilation grates. Those can tend to be a bit sharp, brand new. So I definitely recommend if anyone's putting those in, go ahead and give them a good sand so that, your reptile that will be crawling over it, although you think it may not, a reptile that will be crawling over it can, of course, not cut itself. As you just saw, I just sucked out some of the water that was in that little 10-gallon tank that's where my monitor was hiding. And now I'm working on disassembling this front section. And as you can see now, I'm actually utilizing the front section of that 4x2x4 in order to recycle the glass that was on that 4x2x4. I didn't want to buy brand new glass just because the glass on the 4x2x4 was still sufficient, but the 4x2x4 was not great itself. I didn't feel like going ahead and reselling that. I got it for like $100. It's all MDF. So again, I was just like, all right, I can just do this here. So I can just recycle it here. So that's what I went ahead and did. And you'll see in just a second, I think this was like the not, I wouldn't say the biggest F up, but it was definitely a stump. Okay, so I'm putting everything together. I've already drilled all the pocket holes for that, painted wood. Everything's good. I'm tightening it all up, getting ready to put the glass in. Sides going in, zip, 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 zip. And now I'm going to put in the other side here. Shout out Ryobi. I did go ahead and get the 3-tool deal from Home Depot. That was extremely helpful, and they've been great. And this is the point where we knew we messed up. So I was looking at that. I was like, oh man, okay. So I cut those 2x4s too short, and so the glass did not line up, as you can see there. So here I am doing my quick fix. I'm actually in, as you can see, my shadow. Going ahead, I'm cutting some other 2x4. I always tend to have a little bit excess material just in case, in any room for error. There's me drilling the pocket holes for the first iteration. I think I did this actually 2 times, unfortunately. I for whatever reason, I thought I measured correctly, and this is why they say measure 17,000 times and then cut only once. So as opposed to, cut 4 times and then measure. So again, I'm not necessarily a woodworker, so this is definitely one of the biggest woodworking tasks that I've ever done by myself. And that's a stuck pocket screw there. I get in there. So boom, here. Okay, nope, still not it. So I'm gonna cut this down about another inch here. Bane of my existence, because I did drill the pocket holes, and I probably should have put it in before I drilled the pocket holes and mocked it up before I put the pocket holes in. But hey, you live and you learn. Now I know that in the future, I will make sure to mock it up first, make sure it fits, measure again way more than I was measuring before, and boom, see, ooh, now we're happy it's in. I can go ahead and drill those pocket holes in these untreated 2x4s, which I'll have to go back and treat and paint. But luckily, since those are primarily more so on the outside of the enclosure, I'm not too worried about them. They will be sitting in the water feature area, but I don't see them getting in too much contact with water. Or I mean, the humidity again is going to be another factor, but they should hold up for a little bit. I still have time to treat them. I think I got a sandwich at this point, and I was totally happy that I got everything in. So I was like, all right, lunch break. At this point, I'm now going in and just screwing everything back in because everything's actually fit. It's good. The fascia on the right hand side with the Dutch doors looks great. Everything actually looks good. This is partially what I had created in SketchUp, and so I'm like right here. I'm happy. I'm like awesome. I'm doing my little dance. I'm getting ready to install the water feature. So what you didn't see was me getting that 75-gallon tank in there because it was just a lot of me sweating and cursing, so I couldn't really put that clip in. Um, but I put them on. I put that 75-gallon, which will be the water feature for this monitor, um, on top of some cinder blocks. I wanted to make sure that I was still able to utilize the space that the 75-gallon tank that the 75-gallon tank is occupying by raising it up a bit. I've seen this in other builds, and I was very impressed by it. I also thought that was a great idea, great way to save space. And I was weary of creating some type of like wooden structure to hold up at least. I would say it's 75 gallons. It's like I think it's 20 pounds, so at least a couple thousand pounds of water, or excuse me, 1,000 pounds of water. I'd say. So I was like, okay, let me put it on the cinder blocks. The monitor can also use the cinder blocks as a hide space, and I'm kind of killing two birds with one stone there. For those of you wondering, you're like, oh, if it's 8 by 2 feet, why didn't you use maybe a 120-gallon tank, which would be 4 by 2? Again, we have to think about the interior dimensions. The interior dimensions were shorter, and when you use a table saw or any other use of that saw, and like I mentioned before, I'm not a woodworker, so I didn't really account for the losses that you see with when utilizing different saws, different thickness of blades, different thicknesses of woods. So the inside dimension is about 23 or so inches as opposed to being 24. So I was like, of course, a 24-inch wide aquarium is not going to fit in there. So I thought about something a little bit smaller, hence the 75-gallon. That's me putting on some cork bark like pieces, cork flat pieces there on the sides to help her climb up out of the water. And I added my dirt blend mixture there. So for soil, for substrate, I utilize topsoil, eco earth, play sand, and peat moss. And I think and it provides an amazing cover. Also sand in the actual aquarium. And in my garage, I have a hose, a spigot attachment, which is amazing, so I can do kind of water changes relatively quickly. And I'm just filling it up, getting the filter ready. This is Osaze or Oase. I think it's Oase. Oase Biotherm 300 or Filter Therm 300. super great. Again, it's one of those it's in the same line of those kind of, not same line, but it's very similar to the Biotherms full canister filters. This one is rated for 80 gallons. I thought that'd be more than enough. I may put a couple fish in there, but I'm not gonna have a whole aquarium. And she mainly utilizes the water normally for, of course, going to the bathroom, but I think that this should be sufficient given it's only her. This filter was also probably the most challenging filter I've ever set up in my entire life. Of course, I've set up other filters. I've had turtles in the past. But for canister filter wise, it was definitely a first for me. I was like, I've never really utilized canister filters, only really done the top mount side filter. So that's probably why. But I absolutely do love the filter. And this is that final go here. So everything's planted, and this is what we're looking like.